And ultimately, and this question came up in the meeting with the city council, city staff this afternoon, ultimately it's about people riding bikes. And that's sort of our tiebreaker, if you like. If we really can't quite decide where a community fits on the scale, we take a look at how many people are riding. And in Eugene's case, that's really high. It's a very strong number for a US community. So that's a little insight into what we've seen at the high level of what bicycle-friendly communities have. The guy in the picture is the mayor of Tucson, Arizona, Mayor Walkup. And when we had the program in 2004, they applied. The city of Tucson applied, and they got silver. And it was a good application. They got a good infrastructure. A lot of their streets have got bike lanes, and they build them as they build the community. University is a big factor down there as well in Tucson, and a lot of people riding. So they did pretty well, but they were really not irritated, but they really wanted to do better. So within 5 days of getting silver, they created a Platinum by 06 task force. And they said, this isn't just for the city. We're going to do this with the county. We're going to get 3 neighboring jurisdictions, 2 Indian nations, the regional government, and the state DOT for that region involved in getting to Platinum by 2006. And the effort they put in was just remarkable. They met monthly to figure out what they were doing in each of the 5 E's. They just did an exemplary job of really pushing on to get to that target. They didn't get there. They got to gold by 2006. And we went down to give them the award and the designation. And I was trying to think what you do after a community has just like busted a gut to do this for 2 years. You want to be encouraging and supportive, but also just keep challenging them to do more. What do you say to a community to do that? So I was thinking, you really need to start to convert people who haven't ridden a bike for years, who just you never thought would be cyclists. You need the place to be comfortable for them to ride, where they can get their family out riding, where they're willing to take part in big events like El Tour de Tucson, which is their big signature ride in Tucson. So I got all that prepared. The mayor gets up right before me and says that he hadn't ridden a bike for 50 years. He's 60, at this point he was 65 years old. Hadn't ridden a bike for 50 years, but he finally thought he really should. He took one of our classes from one of our instructors. He's now riding all over Tucson, so much so that he signed up for the El Tour de Tucson with his entire family, made up these special shirts for his family to ride on this ride. They've got the bicycle-friendly community logo on the shirt there. He's like totally bought himself a Breezer commuter bike, and so he's like totally into it, which was great, but totally ruined what I was going to say. So I had to tear that up and start again and come up with something else. But he's really sort of living the dream, and is really committed to this stuff, even though he's not a deep bicyclist, and he's not, in fact, I saw one of his family members at the end of the 100-mile ride, and he literally couldn't move. He was stood on the side of the road, and I started to chat, not realizing that he was actually physically just rooted to the spot. He was so stiff, hurting so much after riding. And it turns out the mayor didn't do 100 miles. He did about 20 or 30, but that's fine. He did great. But that is what it takes. Another level of detail down, the stuff that really seems to make a difference is making sure that not just the easy streets, but the difficult streets, the challenging, busy main corridors have got bike access on them. That's what makes a difference. We just looked at Boston's application and actually gave them a silver. And it's probably a bit of a surprise because it used to be that we all thought Boston was just the worst place to ride in the country. The drivers are terrible, and that may still be true. But in the last 3 or 4 years, since their mayor really got religion, they've really put the bike infrastructure in on the busy, main, difficult, busy streets, not just a few easy side streets. That really is what makes a difference. People want to be able to travel around by bike just the same way and on just the same corridors and streets as they do when they're driving. The places that do well have got a plan. They're not just winging it. They know what they want to get to. They've got someone whose job it is to make sure all this stuff happens. They have people like you engaged in this, not just letting the government get on with it on their own, but really helping, advising, being part of the process, cajoling when necessary, getting help and support when necessary. That's a really critical ingredient. And then having the right policies in place so that this stuff just happens as a matter of routine over time, so that every bike parking installation isn't a fight, it just happens as a matter of routine. So all of that stuff is really what we've learned makes a difference. And we love doing this so much that we've now got a bicycle-friendly states program. Oregon does pretty well, but is always a bit miffed to not be #1, because I think you all think you should be #1, certainly better than Arizona. But anyway, oh no, they dropped a little bit. Anyway, one day Oregon will be #1, I'm sure, when Jerry Norquist from Cycle Oregon has left. But he's the kind of person who at the state level will help make sure you're the best state in the country for this stuff. Watch out for Utah, though. They've got some amazing potential in Utah, mark my words. So we now have bicycle-friendly businesses, and as Brianna mentioned, just this fall, with the help of university coordinators and folks around the country, created a bicycle-friendly university program. And you guys did pretty well and got a silver for the university. Stanford got platinum. I can't, honestly, this is embarrassing, but were there any golds?
Yeah, 2, Davis. And
oh, right, Davis, of course, yeah.
Well, someone else in California.
Okay. Boulder didn't get gold or platinum, which I'm sure irritated them. So Davis, how many of you have been to Davis? Mark, I know you're going there tomorrow, right? You can raise your hand tomorrow and say yes. They, from the days in the 60s when they were just a 5,000 person community in the middle of nowhere to today's 65,000 people, they've just built bicycling into their infrastructure. And they've got a great trail system, a great bike lane system, underpasses and overpasses throughout to get you on and off campus, more bike parking than you can imagine seeing in one place. Bike signals and signal heads. They pioneered a lot of the designs we use today for bike lanes and bike lane design, and you can still see the evidence of that. On campus, maybe it's like this is here between classes or whatever, but the volume of cyclists is just intimidating between classes on campus. If you're there in between lessons tomorrow, just step outside, but look carefully before you do, because there are just, it's like streams of cyclists, so much so they have to have traffic circles or roundabouts instead of regular intersections just to deal with the sheer volume of cyclists. It's pretty cool. Madison, Wisconsin is a gold level community, and their goal is to go beyond platinum. They don't want to stop at platinum. They want to go even further than that. And they want to get to a 25% mode share for bikes. Their university and city are just about to get a bike sharing program courtesy of Trek and the B-Cycle program. So that I'm sure will help transform what's already a pretty great city for cycling and university for cycling.
Are you saying they're funding that program? When you say courtesy of Trek? Or?
Trek, yeah, they're chipping in a significant amount of money, as they're getting some other sponsorship and city money, but Trek is making a fairly significant investment of their own.
Since they're from Wisconsin?
Yes, yes, that's right. They're from 15 miles away in Wisconsin, in Madison. Tucson, as I mentioned before, some great innovative stuff there. They've got video-controlled intersections to get them across some of the major streets on their bike boulevard network. The picture on the left is the main access road to the football stadium, and on game days, getting there by bike is by far the quickest and easiest and most convenient way because of that. And they've made the bike lane concrete. Then there's a little bit of brickwork, and then there's the travel lane, so it's sort of physically protected without having bollards or a raised barrier. Boulder, just amazing to see how that community has grown out from Boulder Creek bike path, which was their equivalent of the Greenway here, to really have a very all-encompassing network, very high levels of bike use. I think the city population, the people who live and work in the city, is now about 21% of trips are made by bike. So very high volumes, good high quality paths on the major streets, and I'm sure you see people doing this in Eugene, right? You probably from the bike center, right? Yeah. Minneapolis, University of Minnesota has been doing a bunch of this stuff. A lot of paint, apparently, that they like to use. And Stanford, a couple from Stanford here on the right, they've been very creative with their signage and making up signs for dangerous intersections there, which is a little alarming, but certainly very descriptive. And all manner of bike parking. I mean, you can trace the history of bike parking from visiting Stanford and Davis's campus. It's pretty amazing to see. So just in case you thought I'd forgotten what lessons we're on here, lesson 7 is that not only do we see this stuff working, but the numbers, all the trends are very definitely on our side. And the ones I want to highlight for you, I'm sure that my esteemed predecessors in this lecture series have given you these numbers, although they won't be unfamiliar to you, but it's always worth remembering that even after all we've done to our cities in the US, that 40% of all the trips that people make are 2 miles or less. And about half of them are 3 miles or less. And yet the overwhelming majority are made by car. So nationally, of this 40% of trips, about 80-some% are made by car, which makes absolutely no sense at all. And those are the kinds of trips that we need to be thinking about making by bike, and that I think are more believable for people to make by bike. There are those of us in the audience who will ride 20 miles each way to and from work. All power to you. That's fantastic, but that's not normal. And most people won't do that, but most people can do a couple of miles here and there, and that's, I think, what we have to focus on. Equally, we get obsessed with the journey to work as being the primary trip that we're worried about or that we count, and yet only 15% of all the trips we make are journeys to and from work. So the rest are social and recreational and shopping and educational and going to church and doing whatever else we do, but only about 15% are commute trips. And again, we sometimes do ourselves a disservice by focusing, and believe me, I say this as the person who just told you we picked Bike to Work Day and make a big deal about Bike to Work Day. It's probably the stupidest campaign from a marketing point of view you can imagine. It's the hardest trip for most people to make by bike. You have to look nice, you've got to worry about your hair, you're traveling further, or some do. Just getting to your kid's school or visiting a friend's house is a lot easier to do by bike. That's the kind of trip, again, that we need to be thinking about getting people to make rather than the commute trip. The return on investment that community after community has seen in improving the bike infrastructure just speaks for itself. The North Carolina Department of Transportation did a study of the investment they made on the Outer Banks. Not particularly outstanding improvements to the bike infrastructure. Some signing, some marking, a couple of trail connections, adding a just about adequate path to the side of one of the main roads down the Barrier Islands there. But they were able to document a 9-to-1 return on investment because of the extra nights that people would stay, because people chose to come to the Outer Banks, because they could ride, because of the extra money we spend eating and drinking after we've been for a bike ride. It's all there, and it makes a difference. And if you think about a ride like Cycle Oregon and the impact it has on the communities it passes through, that's a phenomenal number when you start to add it up. When you look at the savings that we generate or don't cost the community, we're a really good, smart investment.